When it comes to rogue galleries, there's one that ranks supreme, that being the many villains of everyone's favorite Dark Knight. From clowns and mobsters to crocodile men and plant women, there's really no other villain lineup like it, and everyone's got their favorite. But of all the Batman baddies, which ones have a shot at redemption and which ones rank supreme as true villains? I'm Caleb with Wicked Binge, and this is Batman Animated Series Villains Bad to Evil. This one's gonna be a long one, so settle in. As always, we're starting out with our least evil villains, working our way down to the cruel and the criminally insane. For our least evil villain, we have the meek but still pretty famous Sidney Debris, aka Sid the Squid, aka the man who killed Batman. With a title like that, you probably wouldn't have expected a short, somewhat clumsy guy with glasses. Originally a henchman that was employed by Rupert Thorne, Sid was a pretty incompetent guy who always seemed to screw up all his attempts at crimes. One night, during a job, Batman cornered Sid on a rooftop and tried to pry some information out of him while the others slipped away. Sid, in his usual clumsy fashion, managed to escape from Batman's grasp but almost fell from the building. When Batman tried to save him, Sidney unintentionally let him slip over the side of a building and into the massive explosion of a propane tank below, seemingly killing him. As someone who always wanted to be a big shot in the mob, Sidney actually enjoyed his fame, at least for a little while. Unfortunately, with other mobsters wanting to challenge Sid's tough guy title and the Joker wanting revenge on the Squid for killing his greatest rival, Sid soon discovered the downside of being the man who killed Batman. Thankfully, Batman eventually revealed himself and Sid was then sent to Stonegate Penitentiary, where he finally realized his dream of being a big shot. While we're not sure if we can call Sid evil, and we don't know his motivations for wanting to be in the mob, it was still something Sid wanted. However, because he never committed any real crimes and his attempted murder of Batman was an accident, we had to put him at the top of our list. Following him, we have Kirk Langstrom, aka Man-Bat. Though he ended up being more of a brief antagonist than a villain, since he was the first villain that we saw in BTAS, we felt that we had to include him. Kirk Langstrom was once a student of Dr. Emil Dorian, who made the T-99 mutagen. Though he didn't approve of Dorian's goals, Langstrom did believe there could be a legitimate use for splicing and continued to work on experiments while also working at the Gotham Zoo. Eventually, he was able to create a formula that would turn humans into bat creatures, believing that bats were the next evolutionary step. As Man-Bat, he began robbing chemical and pharmaceutical companies in his quest to achieve the perfect formula. After Batman defeated him, Kirk became sort of an ally for the Dark Knight. When Batman was looking for a kidnapped Catwoman, Langstrom pointed out that it was likely the work of Dr. Dorian. Speaking of which, when Dorian had become disreputable and left Gotham, it was Langstrom that cared for the animals Dorian had abused as best possible. Langstrom was also loyal to his wife, promising her that he wouldn't use the bat serum again and keeping that promise. When Francine ended up becoming the new Man-Bat, Woman-Bat, Langstrom did what he could to help Batman subdue her. While he may have started out as a bit of a villain, Langstrom certainly didn't stay that way. We're ranking everyone's favorite feline thief, Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman, next. Of all of Batman's foes, Selina seems to have the hardest time deciding whether she wants to be a hero or a villain. Lured by the thrill of the hunt, Catwoman focuses on stealing rare and beautiful objects. Although a thief at heart, we can give her credit in that she also frequently promotes animal rights, even going as far as using her costume persona to spy and foil companies like Multigon Enterprises for violating the rights of animals. She's also been occasionally known to help out Batman and later Batgirl, although she isn't above double-crossing or briefly manipulating someone if she needs to, like she did with Nightwing in the new Batman Adventures. Her best deeds include helping Batman foil Roland Daggett's scheme in a cat scratch fever, and then saving his life from the Joker's electric chair and almost got him. As for not so great deeds, she actually tried to kill Roland Daggett and then later escaped just a few seconds after her arrest despite promising to turn herself in. Next up is Arnold Wesker, aka the Ventriloquist. Why are we putting Arnold here and not Scarface himself? Simple. Scarface is just a puppet. Arnold is the literal brains of the operation, even if it may sometimes seem like Scarface is more than he seems. Anyway, as a duo of sorts, the two of them were able to pull off a series of Gold Vault heists. Later on, when Veronica Vreeland was holding an exhibit of stuffed extinct and endangered animals from a late relative's collection, Arnold and Scarface planned to steal the animals to sell them on the black market and frame Catwoman for the heists. Their final crime came shortly after Arnold managed to be declared sane, allowing him to get a job at Wayne Enterprises. But while enjoying his new life, Wesker was confronted by Scarface's henchmen, who had even hired a little person criminal to impersonate Scarface in an attempt to shatter Wesker's rebuilt sanity and bring back their boss. In the end, Arnold took his life back into his own hands by killing the Scarface puppet once and for all. We never see Arnold again after this episode, indicating that he really was done with crime. Much like Harvey Dent, Arnold suffers from identity disorder and vents his mobster persona through Scarface. While this doesn't excuse his crimes, we're giving Arnold a lot of credit as, unlike Harvey, Arnold was eventually able to defeat Scarface and live a normal life. It was pretty obvious that despite having that part of his mind in control, he didn't really enjoy being a criminal. We also have to acknowledge that Arnold, at the end of the day, was really only a thief and not someone who is dangerous or out for mass murder like some of the other criminals on this list. For these reasons, we had to give him a fairly high spot. Following him is another minor villain, Paige Monroe, aka Calendar Girl. Before she turned to crime, Paige was a famous and successful model. Unfortunately, fame doesn't last forever, and after she turned 30, her sponsor dropped her and claimed that she was now too old for the model business. So after donning a mask to hide the flaws that only she could see, Calendar Girl decided to get revenge on these sponsors for shunning her and making her feel hideous. This revenge involved kidnapping the heads of Donna Day's Fashion, Gotham's Motors, and WGBS's studio before threatening to kill them with a giant scythe, and on Day of the Dead, mind you. While kidnapping and attempted murder are some pretty major crimes, we're cutting Calendar Girl a bit of slack. Both because this is her only appearance and because she had only been out for revenge, unlike other villains who just want to cause as much damage and pain to innocent people as possible. Granted, revenge isn't an excuse for her actions, but it's pretty understandable, all things considered. Keeping with the tragedy theme, we're ranking Victor Fries, aka Mr. Freeze, next. Before BTAS, this guy was just another campy, goofy, ice-themed villain. But with the series giving him a new backstory, Freeze went from silly to Shakespearean tragedy. His debut episode saw him trying to get revenge against Ferris Boyle, the man who destroyed his work and turned him into Mr. Freeze. Skipping ahead to the movie Sub-Zero, Freeze was willing to kill Barbara Gordon in order to give his wife the blood transfusion she needed. Despite some of his actions, however, Freeze's heart isn't quite as cold as he may like to claim. He helped Batman and Robin defeat Grant Walker and his crazy plans, and we see in the series how caring he can be towards people like his wife Nora and Kanak, a little Inuit boy that he looked after. While we can't completely excuse his actions, since he sort of regresses into more of a villain in the new Batman Adventures, we still felt he deserved a fairly high spot for caring more about helping his wife than taking over Gotham, even if he goes to extreme measures to save her. Though he's known as a major villain in other incarnations, Hugo Strange wasn't much of a standout in this animated series. He only had one appearance where he threatened to reveal the secret identity of Batman. As a scientist, Hugo Strange was able to develop a machine that allowed him to read people's thoughts. He used it to his advantage by learning their darkest secrets before blackmailing them. He did this with Judge Mariah Vargas before setting his sights on Bruce Wayne. Once he learned Bruce's secret, Strange immediately contacted Batman's three biggest enemies in hopes of making a fortune off selling them the secret. When this went wrong, Strange then tried to tell everyone he could about Bruce's secret, with no one believing him thanks to a bit of disguise work from Bruce and Dick. Although Strange does later make an appearance in Justice League Unlimited, we're just focusing on Batman for today. As such, because his only crimes were extortion and blackmail, we can't really put him any lower in comparison to our other villains. Better stay on time. Next up is Temple Fugit, aka the Clock King. You know the Joker's whole speech about one bad day? Yeah, that's pretty much what happened to this guy. When his career was accidentally ruined by Hamilton Hill suggesting that he loosen up his schedule a bit, Fugit decided that the only reasonable solution was to try and take up revenge on Hill. Being obsessed with time and being punctual, Clock King set up a whole scheme to try and humiliate Mayor Hill before attempting to then kill him using the hands of a huge clock. Later on, the Clock King was able to steal a time manipulation device, giving him the chance to try and enact revenge on Mayor Hill once again. We should also mention that in the Batman Adventures comic, Clock King helped elect the Penguin as Gotham's new mayor by rigging the election. If you could sum up Fugit in 2 words, it would be punctual and petty. Not necessarily completely heartless since he only ever targets one man. However, he doesn't seem to care about the possible consequences or property damage that could result from his plans. This was seen in his debut episode where he messed with the traffic lights, and then later when he caused 2 trains to crash into each other. Even though he may be a small-time villain, he can cause a decent amount of destruction when he wants to. As such, we felt he deserved a decent spot. Next on our ranking is District Attorney Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face. Ugh, this poor guy. While Harvey himself was on the level, his multiple personalities like Big Bad Harv weren't quite as moral. Once Two-Face was created in an accident, Harvey's deep-rooted anger issues were able to come to the surface, and he was left in a state where right and wrong no longer held any meaning. Instead, he left his various deeds, whether they be good or bad, up to the simple flip of a coin. He first tried to financially ruin the man who caused his accident, that being Rupert Thorne. When that didn't work, he actually tried to kill Thorne, but was defeated by his own obsession with coin flips. While we know that Two-Face and Batman sometimes clash, with Two-Face often trying to kill Batman, it isn't quite as often as the other big-time baddies. It's implied that if it weren't for Big Bad Harv's interference, Harvey would have a chance at being reformed. This was seen in the episode Second Chances, where it was Harvey's own alternate personality that tried to stop him from getting plastic surgery, preventing him from recovering. Honestly, trying to rank Harvey on our morality scale is pretty tricky, since it's hard to know which actions are truly his own. Insanity doesn't excuse being a criminal, but considering the man he used to be, we feel like we can give Harvey a bit of a break. From the Mask of Phantasm, we've got Andrea Beaumont, aka the Phantasm, next. Much like Bruce, Andrea suffered several tragedies in her youth. She lost her mother as a child, and her father ended up getting murdered by the gang that he owed money to. But unlike Bruce, who wanted to try and make Gotham better, Andrea just wanted revenge and ended up donning the role of the Phantasm to get it. What puts Andrea this high up is the fact that she's actually succeeded in killing people. She killed Chucky Soul and Buzz Bronski, and in some pretty painful ways to boot. She also tried to kill the Joker, and in her later years, she used the Phantasm persona to become a freelance assassin. She's essentially who Bruce might have become if he let himself kill the bad guys instead of just stopping them. While it could be argued that killing a mobster or someone like the Joker isn't as bad as killing someone who's innocent, it's still murder. However, we are willing to raise her a couple of spots for being unwilling to kill Terry McGinnis's parents, understanding that another Batman couldn't be created in a way that violated everything the original stood for. This shows that she does understand what she's doing is wrong, even if she doesn't have regrets and still has lines that she won't cross. Next, we're ranking the sympathetic television sweetheart Mary Doll, aka Baby Doll. Poor Baby Doll. If you know the DC animated universe, you likely know who she is, as her episode is considered one of the best of BTAS. Mary was an actress that starred in a cheesy sitcom Love That Baby. Due to having a rare condition that stopped her from growing, causing her to look like a 5-year-old even as an adult, Mary was typecasted and unable to grow her career after quitting her sitcom. Years later, she reunited with her TV family, which would have been sweet if she hadn't kidnapped them and threatened to blow them up. Mary was also a bit of a diva off camera, becoming spoiled and obsessed with fame, thus making her all the more desperate when she lost it. After a pretty devastating emotional breakdown, Mary tried to live a normal life and ended up falling for Killer Croc after freeing him from prison. Talk about an odd couple. When she learned that Croc was planning on leaving her, Mary sabotaged their final heist at Mid-River Island's nuclear power plant in order for them to die together. It also would have blown up Gotham, so yeah, not exactly a typical Romeo and Juliet death. Much like Arnold, Paige, and Harvey, we can certainly sympathize with Mary and her warped psyche. However, due to the amount of damage she nearly caused, getting to the point where she almost destroyed an entire city, we just had to rank her lower than them. Next up, we've got the first of our mob bosses, Rupert Thorne. Thorne is a pretty well-known mob boss that appears throughout the series. In the first season, we saw that he had a pretty big vendetta against Harvey Dent, who had been trying to put Thorne away for good. As such, Thorne tried to blackmail Harvey, and once Big Bad Harv was after him, it was Thorne that ended up leading Harvey towards the vat of chemicals that would end up disfiguring him, creating Two-Face. Thorne has been involved in gang wars and even hired Bane to try and take out Batman. He's also shown to be fairly selfish towards even his family, as seen when he forced his doctor brother to help him, which resulted in his brother losing his medical license. Unlike other mob bosses like Arnold Stormwell, Rupert never really turns things around and shows that you don't necessarily need to be a costume supervillain to be a threat in places like Gotham. For our next villain, we're ranking Oswald Cobblepot, aka the Penguin. While his BTAS design is pretty clearly inspired by the Tim Burton version of the character, this version of Ozzy thankfully isn't nearly as nasty. Though he's just a bit lonely and just wants to be sophisticated and respected among the elite of Gotham, he doesn't exactly go about it the right way. Penguin mostly just sticks to theft, whether it's fine art or Fabergé eggs. On one occasion, he even managed to steal the Batmobile after finding out who Batman's mechanic was. While not as deadly as some of Batman's other foes, he's still willing to kill when he feels he has to. He went after 2 children who had been spying on him in the much-loathed episode I've Got Batman in My Basement. Then, after trying to reform and believing he found love, Penguin tried to kill Veronica Vreeland and her friend after learning that she had only been dating him as a means to get attention and didn't actually love him. Penguin's biggest crime was when he took control of a Wayne Tech test helicopter, the Raven X-111, and held it for ransom. Eventually, Penguin settles down and opens up a nightclub called the Iceberg Lounge, becoming a mostly reputable businessman who still makes shady black market deals in his back room. Though he's done enough to be ranked pretty low on our scale of evil, it's his so-called retirement from crime as well as his genuine example of briefly being reformed that keep him from being put any lower. Riddle me this, who's next on our ranking? Edward Nygma, aka the Riddler, that's who. Originally, Edward used his impressive intellect to design tricky puzzle games for computers. However, after getting his ideas stolen by his boss, the Riddler decided to play a game of his own. In his debut episode, Edward kidnapped his former boss, threatening to kill him if Batman and Robin didn't solve his riddles in time. But even after being defeated, Edward was still able to escape, leaving his former boss to be paranoid for the rest of his life. Later on, Edward sent a computer to the Gotham police with a virtual reality simulation that ended up trapping Commissioner Gordon. This simulation was so intense that, had Batman not rescued Gordon, it could have either broken the Commissioner's mind or given him a heart attack. Afterwards, he briefly pretended to be reformed in order to not only make millions but also lure Batman into what he called the perfect trap. Despite being wronged by his boss, Edward isn't really sympathetic. He tends to see most things as a game and can be pretty arrogant, obviously believing that it's his superior intelligence that gives him the right to do whatever he wants. We can't call him pure evil, but he certainly isn't moral. Next up is the actor turned monster Matt Hagen, aka Clayface. Yet another tragic villain. Matt could have just been a successful actor. Unfortunately, it was his addiction to a dangerous face cream and his desperate need to hide his disfigurement that eventually sealed his doom. He first tried to kill Daggett, the man who inadvertently turned him into Clayface. Afterwards, Clayface doesn't appear too often and is even assumed dead for quite some time, only reappearing a couple times in the new Batman adventures. But for the time we do see him, he's pretty callous and selfish, along with having some pretty massive anger issues. He treated his best friend Teddy Lupus pretty poorly despite how much Teddy seemed to care for him, and then later used Dr. Stella Bates' crush on him to his advantage. His most callous scene was when he reabsorbed the girl he had created, Annie, so that he could be whole again, not caring that Annie had become her own person after being separated from him. While Clayface could be called sympathetic, we really can't say that he was too great of a person even before his accident, and everything else just makes him come off as even worse. Following him is the cruel and inhumane Lyle Bolton, aka Lockup. Lyle Bolton was Arkham Asylum's former head of security and resorted to cruel and incredibly harsh punishments in order to keep the inmates in line. Some of these punishments included denying them privileges even when they behaved, chaining them to their cells every night, and electrifying their cell doors to prevent escape. He frequently threatened them along with physically and verbally abusing them to the point where even Scarecrow was afraid of him. After trying to actually kill the inmates that reported on him, Bolton was fired from his position. Feeling like he was wronged, he decided to take revenge as the villain Lockup. Because he blamed the police, bureaucrats, and doctors for coddling the inmates, Bolton kidnapped several officials and held them hostage in a decommissioned ship. While it could, again, be argued whether or not supervillains deserve such cruel punishments, it has to be said that Arkham is supposed to be a place that helps rehabilitate, and this has even been proven to work at times with characters like Harley and Arnold. As such, Bolton was definitely in the wrong for how he treated them, and the additional kidnapping and attempted murder was just icing on the cake for this guy. He's cruel, heartless, and has no empathy or sympathy, which easily earns him a decent spot on this list. Time for another famous villainess. Next on our ranking is Pamela Isley, aka Poison Ivy. Like a pretty yet poisonous flower, Poison Ivy is able to do quite a bit of damage, especially when people underestimate her. Like her name implies, she mostly works with plants, chemicals, and poisons for the sake of Mother Earth, being more than happy to resort to eco-terrorism when it comes to protecting nature. She can be pretty ruthless too, having no real qualms with destroying human life if she has to. Poison Ivy's debut scheme was poisoning and nearly killing Harvey Dent. Afterwards, she opens an all-natural resort spa outside Gotham to lure in rich businessmen and women guilty of certain ecological wrongdoings before turning them into trees. It's pretty messed up. We also know that during one Halloween, she used pumpkins filled with poisonous gas to try and poison all of Gotham. These crimes, combined with all the theft that she's done, are what puts her this low down on our list. However, there are a few qualities that prevent her from being ranked any lower. While it may seem like she only cares about her plants, she does care quite a bit about Harley Quinn, even if she doesn't always show it. We also learned in the episode House and Garden that deep down, all she really wants is a normal life with a family. Although she gained this temporary family in a pretty disturbing way, you can't help but sympathize with her a little. Especially since it seemed like she truly cared about her would-be husband and their plant-based sons. Going back in time a bit, we've got the killer of Robin's parents, Tony Zucco, next. This guy is just despicable, and even if he only appears in 2 episodes, he certainly leaves an impact. In his heyday, Tony Zucco ran a racket in Gotham City where he offered protection from accidents to various performing acts and visiting attractions. When Haley's Circus came around, Zucco tried to persuade the owner to take up his offer but was rejected. So Zucco decided to cause an accident himself by secretly slashing the aerial ropes, causing the deaths of the Flying Graysons, save for Dick. It should be noted that even Zucco's uncle, Arnold Stormwell, who was a mob boss himself, was disgusted by his nephew's actions. That's pretty bad. With all the extortion and harm that Zucco did combined with his callousness, it's pretty easy to see he's an evil dude. Oh, also, he's voiced by the guy who played Biff in Back to the Future, so take of that what you will. From mobsters to terrorists, next is Red Claw. When she was first introduced, Red Claw and her cover organization, Multigon, successfully stole various mechanical and biological military-grade weapons from Gotham. She ordered Catwoman to be assassinated after she discovered some of her plans and then threatened to destroy the city if she didn't get $1 billion in gold bullion. Though, to be fair, Red Claw had never actually planned on unleashing her weapons onto Gotham as she deemed it too risky. She did, however, try to kill Batman and Catwoman with chemicals. After being defeated, she wasn't seen again until the episode The Lion and the Unicorn, where she kidnapped Alfred and his partner Frederick in the hopes of getting access to a British missile. Unlike many other Batman villains, we don't know much about Red Claw's backstory or why she is the way she is. As such, it's pretty hard to sympathize with her. She only uses terrorism for personal gain and is a pretty basic femme fatale character, all things considered. While we can't say much on her personality, her morals are definitely skewed enough to be considered pretty evil. Next on our ranking is Waylon Jones, aka Killer Croc. Though he started off as a pro wrestler, it really didn't take him long to turn towards crime. While he doesn't get many episodes to shine, he still leaves a decent impression. In his debut, he tried to kill Officer Harvey Bullock as revenge for arresting him. Later on in the series, during an escape, Croc briefly lived with a small community of former circus freaks. Although they were welcoming towards Croc, it really didn't take any time at all for him to betray them. What's worse is, he didn't even seem to regret it. Outside of his major episodes, Croc is really just a thug, occasionally having his own gang to commit crime sprees with. Probably his worst moment was in Love as a Croc, or after getting betrayed by her, Croc held Baby Doll over a spinning turbine, threatening to drop her. While there are some Batman villains with a bit of a soft side, it's obvious that Killer Croc is all rough, inside and out. Following him is the buff assassin Bane. There really isn't much to Bane, honestly, with his infamy being more due to the Batman comics and The Dark Knight Rises than the animated show. Originally, he was hired by Rupert Thorne to take out Batman, who he saw as a worthy opponent. Before coming to Gotham, he was one of the toughest, most hazardous villains in Cuba. After being given the venom that gave him his strength and breaking out of jail, he then went to work as a freelance assassin. Eventually, Bane built his reputation to the point where he could demand $5 million per job. Additionally, Bane had planned on taking over Thorne's criminal empire after killing Batman. Thankfully, that never happened, and Bane only showed up a couple more times after his debut. Although he never had a major impact on the animated series, his implied body count is enough to put him this far down. Finishing up the mobster villains, we have Roland Daggett. As the president of Daggett Industries, he's a very powerful and very corrupt businessman. Of all the mob villains in BTAS, he's certainly the worst. In a way, he's like Gotham's Lex Luthor, but with even worse morals. He created Clayface, getting him addicted to a face cream that his company created. Daggett also nearly killed Catwoman with a disease that he had created in hopes of turning innocent cats and dogs into bloodthirsty monsters. There was also the time he tried to destroy the homes located on Crime Alley in order to build a mall, not caring if the people who lived there would be left homeless. His final scheme came in the episode Batgirl Returns, where he stole a jade cat to sell on the black market. Certainly not the worst thing he's done, but still pretty bad. To sum it up, Daggett is heartless, careless, and just as monstrous as some of Batman's worst supervillains. Entering our bottom 5, we have Jervis Techt, aka the Mad Hatter. Mind control and controlling a person without their consent is no laughing matter. In fact, it's pretty diabolical. Add in an obsessive romantic crush and you've got a pretty evil picture. Jervis was a former scientist who specialized in mind control. Already being head over heels for his coworker Alice, he did everything he could to try and win her over. But when Alice got back together with her boyfriend, now fiance, the Mad Hatter took matters into his own hands. He kidnapped multiple innocent people, all for the sakes of creating his own sort of wonderland. What makes this all even worse is the reveal from the episode Trial, where after being asked why he couldn't have just left Alice alone, Jervis responds with, "I would have killed her first." Oof, definitely not great. He's also more than happy to try and use mind control to amass himself a fortune. What keeps him out of our bottom 5 is the brief bit of sympathy he shows Batman in the episode Perchance to Dream. While he obviously only sent Batman into a dream world to get him out of the way, he seems genuinely upset and sad for Batman. Jervis took the effort to give Batman the life of his dreams and couldn't seem to understand why Batman chose to leave it. Huh, guess even creepy Alice in Wonderland themed stalkers still have a bit of heart in them. Next up is the most famous henchwoman ever, Harley Quinn. We all know the tragic story of Harleen Quinzel, a former psychiatrist that ended up getting manipulated by the Joker, falling for him hook, line, and sinker, and, in this incarnation at least, being forever unable to leave him. Let's get this out of the way first. What puts Harley this low down is her complacency and willingness to help Mr. J with his schemes. No matter how many people Joker hurts, Harley usually only sees it as just a joke, unable to see just how truly evil he is. Just to show how deep this goes, she was even willing to play mom when she and Joker kidnapped, tortured, and brainwashed Tim Drake. No matter how sympathetic she may be, that is just utterly and inexcusably despicable. Insanity as an excuse only goes so far, folks. However, we do know from episodes like Harley's Holiday that she has the potential to be rehabilitated, even if it doesn't last very long. We also see how she cares for Poison Ivy, and she even helped Batman and Robin track down the Joker when the Joker got his hands on a nuclear bomb. That last point doesn't amount to much though, considering she ended up betraying them and only stopped the Joker when she realized that her pet hyenas would die if the Joker blew up Gotham. While we can't give her too many good points for these instances, they still account for enough to place her outside of the podium of evil. Earning the Bronze Medal of Evil is the self-proclaimed Master of Fear, Jonathan Crane, aka Scarecrow. Even before becoming a supervillain, this guy was pretty messed up. As a professor, he'd routinely use his young students as test subjects for his fear gas, recording their reactions and being amused by their terror. After he was fired, Crane took his obsession with fear to the rest of Gotham. Crane has tried to use his fear gas on a massive scale several times, either as an experiment or as a means to get revenge or money. He doesn't seem to sympathize with his victims at all, despite knowing firsthand how traumatizing the visions from his fear gas can be. He's even dabbled in making people fear less, which is arguably even more dangerous than simply making them afraid. Honestly, Crane doesn't have any excuse for the things he does or the terror that he brings to the citizens of Gotham. He's just a sick and twisted man that easily earns this ranking simply by being one of the few villains that attacks in a psychological and emotional way rather than just physically. For the Silver Medal of Evil, we're giving it to Ra's al Ghul. Much like Red Claw and Poison Ivy, Ra's is an eco-terrorist. But thanks to his massive wealth and centuries of experience, he's able to work on a much larger scale than either of them. Ra's is also the leader of the Society of Shadows, as well as the few people in the world who has access to the Lazarus Pit. His biggest plan was when he tried using the pits and a ton of explosives to return the Earth to its natural form, which would have killed billions of people. Another time, he tried to gain power over life and death through the Scroll of Osiris. Ra's is a man who is dead set on his own goals, not caring how destructive they are. He does have a few positive traits that keep him from the very bottom, however. He does seem to care about his daughter Talia as well as his elderly son Arcady. Additionally, despite all that he does have his own weird sense of honor. This is demonstrated with the fact that despite knowing Batman's true identity, he's never threatened to reveal it to the world. These things aren't much in the grand scheme of things, but they're enough to keep him from the title of Most Evil. Getting the Gold Medal of Evil is, of course, the Joker. Come on, who else would it be? Being the BTAS villain that showed up the most, his plans range from silly yet destructive to completely and utterly devastating. He's hurt and or killed multiple people with laughing gas, is constantly threatening the safety of Gotham, and only cares about himself and his own entertainment. If something seems funny to him, he'll do it no matter how evil it is. Joker is also a master manipulator, able to use different stories and tactics to make people sympathize with him like he did with Harley Quinn. Speaking of Harley, yeah, he's an abusive boyfriend too, there's no question about that. Heck, even before all of this Joker stuff, he was still a pretty bad guy, given that he was part of the mob and was the only one who killed Andrea Beaumont's father. Of course, his worst deed was what he did to poor Tim Drake, as we see in the Batman Beyond movie Return of the Joker. There is nothing sympathetic about the Joker, nor does he have any iota of good within him. While he's far from the most powerful, the Joker has still done enough to more than earn the title of Most Evil. Whew, that was a very long list. But before we go, we've got just a few bonus medals to hand out. Starting with the Darwin Medal, we're giving it to Sidney Debris. Like, dude, you don't need to be in the mob. Why are you in the mob? It's no wonder you nearly got killed several times. The Lust Medal naturally goes to the Mad Hatter. While many BTAS villains have love interests, Jervis is the only one that takes his love to the biggest and creepiest extreme. The Pride Medal is going to go to the Riddler. Again, many BTAS villains are prideful, but we feel that Edward's huge ego and belief that he can't be outsmarted is what earns him this award. For the Envy Medal, we're going to give it to the Penguin. Try as he might, all Oswald wants is to be part of a society that'll probably never truly accept him. Bummer. We're giving the Wrath Medal to the Phantasm for just how far that she goes with her revenge, choosing to become a supervillain to avenge her father and choosing to keep that persona long after she's gotten most of her revenge. Finally, the greed medal is going to Catwoman. Although there are a couple things she cares more about than diamonds and cash, Selina just can't seem to help herself and always goes back to thievery in the end. Alright, that's all we've got. Let us know in the comment section if you agree with our ranking and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist where we break down the morality of characters in your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.